We have a quorum, we do.
Yes, we do. Great. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Great, great. I'm going to call this meeting to order since we have a quorum, and then we will move accordingly. So thank you. Today's Tuesday, February 11th. It is our February school board meeting. For those of you who would like to join us, we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So I'd like a motion, Commissioner Wick?
Oh, yes, okay. Chair Wall, pursuant to our conversation, I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda as follows. We're just moving something around to accommodate something here. Focusing on Section 5, the superintendent's report.
We're going to start with executive.
Oh, sorry, we have to approve the agenda first.
Yes, so let's do that.
Okay, so then I'd like to make a motion, and Bonnie, are you taking minutes? I'll try to be as clear as possible. I'd like to swap sections 2 and 3 on the agenda. So section 2 will be agenda, and section 3 will be executive session. Just because I think we have to approve the agenda first before we go. All right, moving on to section 5, superintendent's report. This again accommodates a request that we want to accommodate here. Item 5C is newly renumbered item 5A. Item 5A is newly renumbered 5B. And item 5B is renumbered to 5C. So we're just bringing up C, the transgender and gender nonconforming youth presentation, up to the beginning of section 5. And then I'd also like to, after section 9, insert a new section 10 called resumption of executive session. And then section 10 adjournment just gets renumbered to section 11, adjournment.
Great.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Yep, any discussion about the agenda? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the agenda is approved. Motion to approve the agenda. Next, we'll go into items to remove. So, yep. Does anyone have any items to remove from the consent agenda? All right, seeing none.
Now we're on.
Yep, item 2, exec session. Commissioner Wick? Or
Sure.
Commissioner Fisher? Here I have it.
I make a motion to consider executive session under 1 VSA 313A3, sorry, 313A1, A, B, C, E, and F, because premature general public knowledge could put the district at a substantial disadvantage to discuss collective bargaining negotiations, personnel matters, and legal matters with our council.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Commissioner Wick. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we'll move to executive session. And for the public, we plan to be out of executive session at 6 o'clock. Next on the agenda is public comment. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here.
Zariva Chasen.
Do you want to give her a time frame? 2 minutes. Thank you. Yep. Yeah. Hi, welcome.
Welcome. We ask that you limit your time to 2 minutes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is this good?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Ziaba Chasen. I'm a transgender woman who graduated from BHS. I graduated from BHS in '09 with no hope for my future. I had no idea what or who I was. My only hints came from Jerry Springer and a few other media depictions of transgender women in that time period. 2 years after graduation, I promised myself I'd be dead within 5 years. Luckily, I was able to meet several amazing transgender people who helped me see that we can be happy being who we are. My white privilege was able to carry me to that point in life. I'm paying that forward by standing with today's transgender and gender nonconforming youth. The curriculum and faculty training must include material that teaches children and teachers that being trans is okay, not something to be ashamed of. It is no exaggeration to say that that a good education on transgender people, our health and history is life or death for my people. Save our children from the future I narrowly avoided, that is, death, and adapt the curriculum and faculty training to help us live the way you would any other student. Or we'll win your seats and do it ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak at public comment? Oh, Brian Sheen is here.
Oh, great.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Welcome, Brian.
Hi. Sorry I'm late. I was driving at a very reasonable speed from Montpelier.
Welcome, Brian.
Hi, I'm Brian Chena. I'm a former school board member, and it's bringing back memories being in this cafeteria while you're looking for a new superintendent. So I'm a former school board member, and how much time do I have?
2 minutes.
Oh, shoot, okay. I'm a former school member and a current state representative. However, I'm first and foremost a social worker, and I'm a clinical social worker with 21 years of experience working with youth and families in their homes, in schools, in the justice system, on the streets, and in all kinds of healthcare settings. In my private practice, I provide individual psychotherapy for youth. When working with the youth dealing with gender identity issues, I, like many other clinicians, am guided by the work of WPATH and their standards of care. The World Professional Association for Transgender Health is an international multidisciplinary professional association whose mission is to promote evidence-based care, education, research, advocacy, public policy, and respect in transsexual and transgender health. The vision of WPATH is a world wherein transsexual, transgender, and gender nonconforming people benefit from access to evidence-based health care, social services, justice, and equality. And the overall goal of these standards of care is to provide clinical guidance for health professionals to do a better job. WPATH recognizes that health is dependent upon not only good clinical care, but also social and political climates that provide and ensure social tolerance, equality, and the full rights of citizenship. Health is promoted through public policies and legal reforms that promote tolerance and equity. I myself have experienced the harm that occurs when children are not supported in their physical and social environments. As a queer, multi-gendered, multi-spirited person, I've survived the pain, abuse, and suffering of being rejected by this society. I recognize now that I'm sacred, and that I have a rightful place in the order of things, and I am an important strand in the web of life. It was a very difficult path for me to realize that my life has value and that my people are special. All children deserve to feel valued and celebrated, and to know their unique power and immense beauty. Please continue to implement policies and practices in the Burlington School District that promote acceptance, love, and justice for transsexual, transgender, and gender nonconforming youth. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak at public comment?
All right. Seeing none, we will move on to board reflections. And I would ask that the board we're on a time constraint because we want to get to our presentation. So if there's anything pressing with regards to reflection, I'm open to having any commissioners to reflect, but I'd like to move on so that we can give our public more time. Okay, great. So we will move on to the superintendent's report. On the agenda, we moved item C to start so that C advances up to A. So we'd like to welcome our public here and our BSD community and greater community throughout Burlington and the state that are here tonight. I want to give special recognition to BHS parent Jessica Oski, who put this wonderful group together to come here tonight. So we have put you on the agenda And we look forward to hearing from you. So we'll hand it over to Superintendent Obeng.
Thank you, Chairperson, for creating this space on the agenda for this important item. The board has been committed, and district has been committed to equity principles in our practices and our policies, and we're just in the infancy, in particular, different equity seeking group. And today we have the opportunity to listen to some information around transgender and gender nonconforming youth. We're looking for community partners, advocates, and individuals to partner with us as we move forward. So this is a great opportunity to embrace this chance to listen, and hopefully this is the beginning of work that we need to do in terms of moving forward. I also want to thank the many people who have emailed and communicated support around highlighting this particular issue within the equity umbrella, and hopefully this is the beginning of many steps to come forward. You've already mentioned Jessica Olski and the group. Jessica, I'm going to leave the forum to you. We do have mics and spaces here for your party. If you'd like to sit here and use the mic so it can be televised and heard broadly, or you can use the chairs there as well. So I'll leave that up to you.
So RITN, are you able to, is that okay? You're able to? Thank you.
Hi. Hello? Can you all hear me okay?
Jeff,
No.
a minute. All right,
Mic check. Okay.
great, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And major thank you to Jess for putting this all together. I'm supposed to let you all know that you have a packet with testimony and relevant materials. Okay, so, okay, great. All right, I'm just gonna hold this like this. Hello, members of the Burlington School Board. My name is Dana Kaplan. I use he and him pronouns, and I'm the Executive Director of Outright Vermont. We are the state's LGBTQ youth organization, here to make sure that all youth have the hope, equity, and power that they need to live their fullest and most vibrant lives. The heartbreaking truth is that we know that that's not currently happening, not here in Vermont, and not within the district. And while we know that isn't always the case, we do believe it is possible, and furthermore, that if any district in Vermont has the resources, the passion, and the people to make it so, it is you. We've gathered here today, Burlington School District students, alumni, parents, community professionals, thought partners, and concerned neighbors to voice our concerns, to dispel some damaging myths, to share some lived experiences, and ultimately to work together in helping you shine a light on your North Star, cultivating caring, creative, and courageous people, quote unquote. The information you will hear tonight paints a clear picture of transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary youth, many of whom have been failed in systemic, coherent ways by the very institutions meant to be their anchors of safety and support. The 2019 Vermont Youth Risk Behavior Survey data demonstrates the consistently devastating realities of what it's like to have to navigate your days as an LGBTQ young person. And while the current data isn't yet broken out more specifically by gender identity, we know that risk behaviors are far worse for transgender youth compared to their gay, lesbian, bisexual, and or queer peers. Let me provide a little window into the reality of our latest data and what it demonstrates. Only 37% of LGBT youth say they feel like they matter to their community. And when you're moving through the world, having to navigate harm without support and validation, that makes sense. In fact, in the past month, 1 in 3 LGBT youth was bullied in their school, and 2/3 of all LGBT youth felt sad or hopeless almost every day for a 2-week period in the past year. It is hard to be a student in those circumstances. In fact, it is so hard that half of all LGBT youth have hurt themselves on purpose, and 1 in 5, yes, 1 in 5 LGBT youth in Vermont attempted suicide in the past year. These are your students. These are their classmates. This is her kid. As a district, your stated priorities are clear: reducing disparities and closing the achievement gap. You want to raise the bar. Let me say this much: I believe this just may be your moment. We acknowledge that the board did receive a factually inaccurate and dangerous letter from an anonymous school district employee, a letter which, among other things, highlights the dire need for you as a district to engage in a coordinated effort to promote inclusive and affirming learning environments in all of your schools. This school district has always been a leader within our Vermont education system, often on the forefront of best practices, and most especially when it comes to equity and justice. In fact, many say you are the ones setting the precedent for everyone else in this state. As a district, we urge you to be out in front, to send a clear message about where your priorities are, and to back your values with coordinated moves. May tonight underscore the opportunity you have to move swiftly, with integrity, thoughtfulness, and an eye on getting this right. Because in no uncertain terms, some of your most vulnerable students' lives are counting on it. They are counting on you. Thank you for helping to make sure all youth graduate from your schools their most courageous selves.
Hi, welcome, Sarah.
Hi. My name is Sarah DeSilvia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a rural family nurse practitioner in Franklin County. I'm also a Burlington resident and the parent of 2 Burlington School District kiddos, one who's a senior here at BHS. I'm here today in my role as a family practice provider to try to speak to some of the concerns raised in the letter to the board and hopefully enhance understanding of the role of educational tools in supporting kids and their families and the communities they live within. I'm not going to speak to the risks of being LGBTQ, as evidenced by the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. Dana did that as well, as he always does. I will not speak to the science of gender-affirming care. Dr. Erica Gibson will follow, and she's a specialist in this, but I do want to say thank you to her for providing care for some of my patients. I'm a general family practitioner, and I'm going to speak from that spot, a spot of caring for kids and families every day. Within that spot, I've come to be an anchor of sorts for gender-affirming care in Franklin County. The letter referenced the common educational tool entitled the Gender Unicorn. We've got copies of this today. It's in your packet, so you can review it. I'm starting here because my hope is to reference it tonight in the same spirit I invoke in my conversations with kids and families, as a reference tool for baseline understanding finding. The tool does the best job it can in describing the possibilities of gender and attraction. It's an evolving tool as our understanding of these concepts evolve as a scientific and social community. What it represents are the following concepts: sex assigned at birth, which is the classification of gender based on biological traits; gender identity, which is one's internal sense of gender; gender expression, which is the outward way one manifests one's gender; and then physical attraction and romantic attraction. Some important thoughts regarding this tool is that, first of all conversations with kids from this perspective need to be crafted as is developmentally appropriate. This is the tenet of our craft as pediatric providers. But what we know from the literature is gender identity can be known to kids as distinct from sex assigned at birth as early as preschool. Although sex assigned at birth is here not a spectrum on the tool, the science of genetics, hormones, and secondary sex characteristics are in fact far more complex. Each of these concepts are influenced by internal, social, and cultural forces. For each of these concepts, as evidenced by the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, points of conflict between self, family, society, and culture can be really challenging. But there are also opportunities to foster understanding. These are conflicts between sex assigned at birth and gender identity, conflicts of sexuality and social or familial norms. Each of these concepts are also important for kids and families across the spectrum of identity. I use this tool to help kids who identify as asexual understand how they fit in the sea of crushes of middle school. I use this tool to help parents understand the gender identity of their kids and foster conversations on the intersection of culture and self. I use this tool to help kids understand the possibly conflicting feelings of physical and romantic attraction. I use this tool to foster conversation and understanding finding. It's in this vein that I offer it today. It represents the science of identity as we work to understand it today. It's a tool whose orientation is supported by all major medical professional organizations, including the American Nursing Association, the American Academy of Family Physicians, and the American Academy of Pediatrics. It can be used to open the kinds of conversations we need to have to meet kids and families where they are. These are the kinds of conversations I have in my clinic with kids and families every day. I do hope we leverage the moment of this letter to collectively address fears, listen, and foster deeper understanding. The science behind why this is necessary is blatantly clear. The ethics are clear as well. The goal is a community full of healthy kids and families. Thank you.
Hi, welcome, Dr. Gibson.
Thank you so much. Good evening. My name is Dr. Erica Gibson. I use she, her pronouns. I am the adolescent medicine specialist in the Department of Pediatrics at the University of Vermont Medical Center, where I am also the current medical director of the Transgender Youth Program. In addition, I serve on the executive board of the Vermont chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics and on the National Executive Committee for the American Academy of Pediatrics Council on School Health. Prior to coming to Vermont, I worked as a medical director of school-based health centers at Columbia University Medical Center in New York City. For 7 years, I worked with 8 large multidisciplinary clinic teams and school administrations to provide full-time, state-of-the-art medical and mental health care in pediatric clinics within the walls of 8 large New York City public schools. This included providing comprehensive, inclusive sex education in the classroom. In addition, I was previously a high school teacher for 2 years, and I currently teach sex education classes every semester here at Burlington High School. At this point in my career, I feel fairly confident in my knowledge of adolescence, healthcare, sex education, school systems, and how they might interact. I'm here tonight to speak as a medical provider, educator, and advocate who is passionate about the health and well-being of young people, and in particular, youth that identify as transgender or gender nonconforming. Most importantly, I'm here to support the voices of the young people. I would like to share with you a few specifics about the medical services that we provide in our Transgender Youth Program at UVM Children's Hospital. While our work is important and provides essential, critical medical care for young people, we cannot do our work in a vacuum. We cannot optimize support and care for transgender and gender nonconforming youth without working all together to encourage supportive school and community environments. In the interest of time, I will share some key bullet points about the care we provide. Our Transgender Youth Program has been in existence since 2015 and currently serves over 100 young people and families in Vermont and upstate New York. We have new referrals coming in every single month, sometimes weekly. Prior to 2015, youth in Vermont had to travel to Boston for any gender-related medical care. Our program consists of a multidisciplinary team, including 2 medical providers, 1 social worker, 1 psychologist, and 1 nurse. We work very collaboratively with primary care clinicians like Sarah, community mental health providers like Brian, schools, Outright Vermont, and other partners as needed. As with all modern medical care, our work in the TYP is based on evidence-based guidelines from professional medical organizations, most importantly, the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society of America, and WPATH. If you know the medical world at all, you know that our entire medical system exists around specific diagnoses. In the Transgender Youth Program, the specific diagnosis we work with is gender dysphoria. When someone has gender dysphoria, it means that they basically have a conflict between their physical or assigned gender and the gender with which they identify. As you have heard in previous testimony, gender dysphoria can significantly interfere with the health and well-being of a young person, especially if they are not supported. A specific diagnosis of gender dysphoria involves meeting very specific criteria from medical guidelines. One of the key aspects of diagnosis is that the gender dysphoria must be consistent, insistent, and persistent over a period of time. Prior to the onset of puberty, our TYP program supports young people and families in what we call social transition, the change of names, pronouns, shifts in gender expression. When a young person with gender dysphoria starts pubertal changes, we can begin to offer medical interventions to support their transition, as long as we have assent from the patient, consent from parents and guardians to begin treatment, and a letter of support from a mental health provider with experience with gender dysphoria. We also complete physical examinations and laboratory evaluations as needed. Patients and families also commit to clinic follow-up visits every 3 to 4 months once they begin treatment. It is important to know that not all young people with gender dysphoria choose medical interventions. The first interventions that we can offer, if people want them, with the start of puberty is what is known in general terms as a puberty blocker. The second intervention we can offer, starting at an older age, is gender-affirming hormone treatment with estrogen or testosterone. While there is variability in treatment regimens, the majority of patients have an overlap of both types of treatment, a puberty blocker and a gender-affirming hormone during adolescence. Some young people choose to access gender affirmation surgeries later in their treatment. At this time, young people who choose to access top surgery or bilateral mastectomy may generally do so as early as 16 years old, but most other surgeries are not accessible until people are over 18 years old. It is important to note that here in Vermont, both private insurance companies and Vermont Medicaid provide very generous and often complete coverage for all services that we offer in the Transgender Youth Program. They consider treatment as essential for health and well-being. They do not consider treatment as elective and ineligible for coverage. I would like to reiterate that young people and their families reach the stage of medical intervention after a significant period of thoughtful, comprehensive, and collaborative care. And once again, I would like to emphasize that we cannot provide medical care for young people with gender dysphoria in a vacuum. It is essential that they feel safe, valued, and cared for in their families, schools, and communities. We are here tonight to ask for your assistance in promoting inclusive, safe, affirmative learning environments in all Burlington schools. I look forward to collaborating with you and others here tonight in engaging in this important work. And to paraphrase Representative Danica Rome in a video that went viral from the floor of the Virginia legislature last Friday regarding a bill she was supporting that would prohibit discrimination on the basis of gender identity or sexual orientation, trans kids should be welcomed, celebrated, respected, and protected because of who they are, never despite who they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, welcome again,
Hi.
Jess.
Hi, thank you. My name is Jessica Oski. I'm a Burlington resident and a parent to a transgender 10th grader at BHS and an admirer of many other trans and gender non-binary kids in the school system. I'm an attorney and I work as a lobbyist in Montpelier, which is part of my skill set in organizing. I want to thank you all for your willingness to serve on the school board. Your service is important and probably equal parts rewarding and thankless. I helped organize a presentation here tonight because I know the board is embarking on the training and policy reform required by the settlement agreement with the Department of Justice, and because I know that all of you are working towards providing our kids with a safe environment in which to learn, and that's why we're here to help you do that. As other presenters have pointed out, we're here to support the board, to offer resources, and to hold the board accountable for promoting an inclusive, safe, and affirming learning environment that decreases inequities experienced by transgender and gender nonconforming students who are often underrepresented and underserved. I'm going to briefly draw your attention to one of the many resources produced by Vermont's Agency of Education. In your packet, there's a copy of a document called Continuing Best Practices for Schools Regarding Transgender and Gender Nonconforming Students. And The Agency of Education and the Department of Children and Families, who you're going to hear from next, these are not fringe organizations. These are mainstream organizations that produce evidence-based and educated documents, which I think is important for you to keep in mind. This document here, it has best practices, and these best practices are intended to help school and district administrators take steps to create a culture in which transgender and gender nonconforming students feel safe, supported, and fully included, and to meet each school's obligation to provide equal educational opportunities for all students. These practices that are outlined in this document are intended to help schools ensure a safe learning environment free of discrimination and harassment. The procedures do not anticipate every situation that may occur, and the needs of each student must be assessed on a case-by-case basis. Every student in school is unique, and building administrators should discuss these issues with students and their families and draw on the experience and expertise of their colleagues as well as external resources. The policy document includes definitions of all words that confuse people, like cisgender, gender identity, gender expression, gender nonconforming, transgender, etc., and it explains what kind of behavior constitutes gender-based discrimination and harassment. This policy also provides guidance related to the privacy expectations of students and families. And this is a big and important deal. The guidance suggests that schools should closely with student and family, if appropriate, in devising an appropriate plan regarding the confidentiality of the student's transgender or gender nonconforming status that works for both the student and the school. The support of the student's family may vary. In adopting a student-centered approach, a school can best support a transgendered student by involving the student regarding how and what information about the student is shared within the school and between the school and the student's home. The general rule is that school personnel should not disclose information that may reveal a student's transgender or gender nonconforming status. That's up to the student. The policy provides guidance on how schools should deal with official records, which is a big and hard issue for some schools, for transgender and gender nonconforming students. For example, to the extent that the school is not legally required to use a student's legal name or sex assigned at birth on school records and other documents, the school should use the name and gender preferred by the student. This may require the school to maintain two sets of records, one with the student's legal name and sex assigned at birth, kept separate from routine school records to avoid inadvertent disclosure. This is somewhat minor, but it's a huge issue for my kid and other kids out there that are having a hard time having their classroom teachers use their proper pronouns, having their school IDs and other things represent their used name. The policy addresses how to deal with names and pronouns. For example, students should be addressed by school staff by the name and pronoun corresponding to their gender identity. Students are not required to obtain a court order name or gender change or to change their pupil personnel records as a prerequisite to being addressed by the name and pronoun that corresponds to their gender identity. Student ID should be issued in the name that reflects a student's gender identity. And this is the Agency of Education. This isn't me saying this. The policy reviews best practices related to sports and physical education, restrooms, and locker room accessibility, other areas where schools really struggle. The guidance is here. It's available for the review and the taking. As I said before, the Vermont Agency of Education is not a fringe or radical organization. The agency is a mainstream professional regulatory agency. The best practices policy was adopted so that schools can comply with state and federal anti-discrimination and anti-harassment laws. These best practices exist to support schools. We look forward to this board ensuring that all Burlington schools have adopted, implemented, and embraced these best practices so that all of our kids can thrive in an inclusive, safe, and affirming learning environment. Thank you.
Welcome Lindsay and Christine from DCF. Christine Johnson, Lindsay Barron.
Good evening. I am Christine Johnson, Deputy Commissioner of the Vermont Department for Children and Families in the Family Services Division. And I am very honored to be here tonight, very honored to be here in this role. I have been in my role for the last 8 months and was absolutely delighted when I took the job and found out that we had a policy in support of LGBTQ youth in the state custody of Vermont. I have to tell you, I'm going to ask Lindsay to fill in the details about how we got to that policy. But I think you are on the edge of a wonderful opportunity here, and that is to do, as many have said before me, to really affirm and to welcome and understand and meet the young people that you work with at the level that they are asking to be met with. I think it's a huge opportunity. And I know it's perhaps a cliche and it gets overstated, but Maya Angelou was right when she said that when you know better, you do better. And what's striking to me about the Youth Risk Behavior Survey is that these outcomes that we're seeing for our young people are happening in Vermont, one of the most progressive places in our country. And we should be ashamed of the fact that our young people are feeling depressed, anxious, and belittled, and that they often don't have a purpose in living. And we can do that. We can make a difference in that trajectory. I hope that you will here in Burlington, and I know that we will continue to do this hard work for the Department for Children and Families. And I will say, and I know Lindsay will echo, that it's not easy work. There are a lot of different opinions, and people come with a lot of different philosophies when it comes to this issue. But I really urge you to really take action in the way that you are being poised to here. Be bold and be courageous. It really, you have a lot of young people that are begging you to do that, and I would just really echo the support for that.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Barron. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm our Policy and Planning Advisor within the Family Services Division of the Department for Children and Families. And I'm so excited to be here and to talk about this work. I'm not here to deliver a perfect, happy kumbaya story of we just one day decided to do this amazing work, and like Christine said, it's difficult and there were hurdles. And I think what's most noteworthy of where we've come is that this all began when we began receiving feedback from young people themselves in our care, saying, you know, our experiences really could have been better. You could have been more supportive. You know, things could have worked out better, or here's where you could have improved. And we really decided to lean in to that feedback. And it came at a time where we had young people sharing this feedback with us, and then we had folks from Outright Vermont come to us and share this feedback. And so through that, we developed a really wonderful partnership, and sort of step by step throughout the way, we didn't make a decision or develop anything without Outright at the table advocating for youth voices. And so early on in the beginning, I think we had a moment of pause because we're a large system. We have 12 district offices throughout the state, and as I'm sure you all know and have heard, DCF is a very large, unwieldy system. And so to go into a transformative practice change takes a lot of thought and planning and strategicness involved in it. And so along the way, we did turn to national research as well, and we learned that several national studies have found that LGBTQ young people are overrepresented in child welfare and youth justice, and are twice as likely as their peers to experience poor treatment and care. And so we really took that as a sign of we're not alone here, and let's be leaders in this practice. So in 2016, we formed an LGBTQ work group, formed with a multidisciplinary team of folks. By no means was it only internal. We invited our community partners and stakeholders to the table, quite honestly, for the purpose of keeping it honest and really keeping us in check in terms of what kids and families are actually experiencing. So we met for about a year's time, pretty much every 6 weeks. We were coming together, we were talking about practice subjects, we were reviewing materials, and about a year later is when we first issued our policy. So that was in January of 2017. Policy 76 is one of the documents in your folders, so I'll just call attention to that. We cover a number of topics from identity, name, pronoun preferences, issues around documentation and confidentiality, within affidavits, within case plans, within our own internal system. We cover safety planning, factors and considerations for our investigations and our assessments, placement considerations, and how to make sure that young people are in safe, both physically and emotionally safe environments. And we also put a consultative structure in place where there's a hard stop to pull a team together and discuss specific topics related to a young person. In order to sort of fulfill this implementation and move our work forward, we partnered with quite a few groups, and we were the recipient of a Vermont Community Foundation grant, which was a collaboration between Outright, ourselves, the Washington County Youth Services Bureau, and YDP, and the Vermont Child Welfare Training Partnership through UVM, and that's how we addressed most aspects of the training requirements, of training our staff, bringing training to bench bars and conversations with judges, attorneys, guardians ad litems, and other partners of ours. It helped us develop an online training curriculum for both our staff and our foster parents and residential treatment providers. And I think that's where I'll stop. I guess I'm here to say, if you're needing partners in this work, we are another large system that can help assist you along the way.
Hi, welcome, Barb.
Hi, thank you so much for your attention to this important project and this important issue. My name is Barb Prine. I'm a lawyer at Vermont Legal Aid. I've been a lawyer there for 25 years. As part of my job, I counsel parents and guardians of youth about bullying and harassment issues in schools. As another part of my job, I represent transgender youth and adults seeking health insurance and Medicaid funding for their transgender surgery. 24 years ago, I successfully represented a transgender man seeking surgery. He got the surgery. The next time I saw him was 12 years later, as we were both parents at the Hunt introductory barbecue, and there we were talking about, hadn't seen him in 12 years, and we're both talking about how nervous we were when our oldest was hitting middle school and the changes that brought. So I just want to say, as a lawyer at Legal Aid, I frequently negotiate with institutions who have discriminated against people. And I reviewed the Burlington School District obligations under the settlement agreement that you guys recently entered into with the U.S. Attorney's Office. It's clear that this settlement agreement includes a requirement that the non-discrimination coordinator conduct or arrange for training on the policies and applicable laws, including non-discrimination laws, and including requirements to appropriately respond to bullying and harassment. It also requires that there be training and opportunities for staff to ask questions about how to implement the district policies, including non-discrimination policies. I strongly encourage you to robustly move toward that training opportunity, to work with Outright, to work with the resources in this room, to plan and implement a way to help your staff understand the needs of transgender youth and to create an inclusive community. Your settlement agreement requires you to do it, but training is an institution's best protection from repeating mistakes over and over again. Training is the way to give well-intentioned staff the best opportunity to respond appropriately. Failure to train means that you will have staff who are intentionally or unintentionally responding inappropriately, and you will end up back in front of the Human Rights Commission and the U.S. Attorney's Office. That's what happens when institutions don't train their staff. We are living in a time when our community needs the language and the skills to be inclusive. We need to learn together how to recognize and respond to bullying and harassment and how to create inclusive spaces. I also want to say my workplace did this. 3 years ago, Vermont Legal Aid required everyone on its staff to attend gender inclusive training. And it was a great thing to do. It was a safe space for us to ask our questions, because we're all learning together right now, and some of this is confusing and not everyone knows what to do. We learn from each other as we go. And what happened was it changed our way of dealing with each other. We learned who we could ask when we didn't, if I don't know what to do, I'll go ask Amelia and she'll help me figure out what to do. That is how we created this space where if we didn't know how to do the right thing, we could go to the right person who would help us. So I cannot recommend enough the need to embrace training and embrace training with the folks in this room. I want to thank you for making this much time to talk about it. I think that is the first step forward, is you guys are educating yourself about what's available to help you during this important time. So thank you very much for doing this.
Thank you. Hi, welcome, Jess.
Hi, I'm Jess Kell. I'm a Burlington resident, and I've had 3 children go through the Burlington School District. My oldest is 23, and my youngest is 16 and a current student at BHS. So I've been involved with this school district for many years. When one of my children came out as LGBTQ almost 10 years ago, I went to the principals at Edmonds Middle School, the principal and vice principal, and I asked for their support. I said, I think it would be great to have Outright come in and do some training. I really feel like my kid needs more support. And the response at that time 10 years ago was, we really understand bullying here. We've got this, we're all set. That child heard repeated slurs used during the course of his day. I repeatedly asked for support from the school and was continually told, we've got this. And I was also told, we have a gay teacher here at the school who might be able to be a support person. When my youngest began presenting in a gender non-conforming way 8 years ago, we did have a pretty supportive response at the elementary school. However, when it was time for him to transition into the middle school, I had a lot of concerns. And I reached out to another principal again and said, hey, what have you got for supports for LGBTQ youth? And the response at that time, and again, this was 5 years ago, was this isn't a middle school issue. The reason I share these stories with you is because I want you to understand that this may be new information to all of you. It may not be. But there are families of youth in this district who have been asking for support for a very long time. And there is, I feel, an urgency in asking you to respond in a more timely way and not let another extended period of time go by. I also want to highlight to you very quickly that it's a regular occurrence that we have to come to the schools and plead for supports. You already heard about some of the issues with documentation. We have to come and talk about bathrooms. Can you please set up a bathroom? Can you please make sure that bathroom is unlocked? Again, can we talk about the bathroom? We come in once, we ask, it's not fixed. Can we have a locker room? My requests for a gender-neutral locker room went unanswered for months until we got a response. And what I also want to highlight is that the training and support around transgender youth is also going to support all of the LGBTQ youth in this school district. And we're talking about possibly 14% of the students in this district. That's a significant number of children who are not getting their daily needs met. when they have to not go to the bathroom for 8 hours at a time because there isn't a safe place to use the bathroom. I also, very quickly also, there are well-intentioned, many well-intentioned staff in this district who sometimes respond in ways that are less than helpful. And that training is so, again, that training is so important in making sure that even the folks who are wanting to do the right thing aren't somehow misspeaking. So I thank you for your time.
Hi, welcome.
Hello.
My name is Ezra Totten. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a sophomore at BHS. I'm transgender.
Hi, my name is Oliver Oski. I use he, him pronouns, and I am also a sophomore at BHS, and I am transgender. Ezra and I are the leaders of the Gender and Sexuality Alliance here at BHS. We provide a safe space for LGBTQ+ community in our BHS twice a week. Over the course of the first semester, we notice on a regular basis our peers saying things like, "No homo," and "That's gay." This is something we hear in the hallways, classroom, on the bus, and all around the school. Multiple times a week, students in our GSA have come to either Ezra or I saying that they have been bullied or harassed or have overheard their fellow peers saying anti-LGBTQ+ comments. This is not a small issue and is not rare for students in our school to feel isolated by these comments.
I brought up this in a conversation with Oliver in December, and from there we opened it up to our group. And as a group, we formed a set of notes of what we saw that was going on, and invited a member from staff member from Outright to come and talk with us about next steps and what we can do to advocate for a safer school community. Our group is very small. There's about 10 kids, but the amount of times they come to us is very concerning for us.
As a group, this concerns us because it creates a hostile environment for the growing LGBTQ+ community here at BHS, and it makes it really hard for us to focus on our schoolwork. We want to change the environment, and we have been planning to ask the teachers for support in making this happen. But our teachers need training in order to recognize these situations as they occur and to respond to them appropriately.
For an example, yesterday during a conversation in bio class, we were talking about heterozygous and homozygous traits, which quickly turned into an opportunity for a student at my table to begin to respond, to share his opinions about trans people and their choice to be transgender. I felt that I needed to respond and defend myself. Listening to other people share their opinions about my identity is a regular occurrence, and it is exhausting. This interaction is evidence that there is little to no awareness of the day-to-day reality for a trans high school student. It feels like it is our responsibility to educate our peers and teachers about our right to exist. We need your help to make this change.
We are a part of BHS community, and we have the right to feel safe in our own classrooms and with our own teachers. Thank you for your time.
Hello. I am anchoring here at the end, so we are almost done. My name is Mara Iverson. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Education at Outright Vermont, and I'm the trainer. So, I've got actually some really excellent news for you, and that is I have here in my hands a comprehensive 360-degree top-to-bottom K-12 plan, including you all, for training. And it's not just education training, it's like systems improvement, brainstorming time. I've got it already here. It's written. As a matter of fact, I've been working with Sparks since last year. He was the first to approach me to say, I think we really need to do this comprehensively, district-wide, all of the levels. Can you come up with a plan for me? And so we wrote a plan, and we discussed it with the superintendent in October. And that means that This plan is ready to go, ready to be delivered as soon as you decide on the elements that, as a district, you want to proceed with. And I promise that I'm going to do everything in my power to hold up all of the things that you've just been hearing as part of these trainings, because we are not only here tonight, we are your community, we are here to support. We're not like, here's the plan, go out on a limb and figure it out yourselves. We're here and vested to support you, the district, the school board, and we want all of us to succeed together. So I just want to tell you that the education possibilities could happen as soon as you desire them. It doesn't have to wait another day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. I don't think it can happen soon enough. So, do want to appreciate the compelling stories and testimony that were shared tonight, and I think it will have an impact on us on how we do the work. We know it's important work that we have to do, and we want to do it, but putting the faces and the stories adds another element in terms of putting ourselves in your shoes. Someone quoted the vision statement, which was a vision statement we worked on 5 years ago, and it came from the community. And it said, cultivating caring, courageous people. And I was so proud to see many of our former graduates and students who were courageous enough to come forward and share their stories around what we need to do to move forward. I'm really encouraged about that for the future of our young people here, and of course of society as well too. Last thing I'll say, just reminded me of, there's a Chinese phrase that says Wei Ji, and I'm probably slightly mispronouncing it, but it means change and opportunity at the same time. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to look at the type of change that we want to have here in Burlington. So thank you, Jessica, for reaching out, and thank you, Mara, for meeting with us. And we will be taking you upon your invitation to partner. We have our Director of Equity and Safe Inclusive Schools, Sparks, who I think is here tonight, somewhere hiding in the back listening. And we'll be sure to follow up to help us incorporate the actions that need to come forward. Thank you. I don't know how we transition to finance after this, but.
I really, the document that you provided, the goal, what you want the board, the outline, the time you took to put it all succinctly, we greatly appreciate it. So on behalf of the board, we recognize you, we appreciate you. We're very rich with all the talent that's in this room to move forward. So thank you from everyone on the board, and I want to recognize Sparks' work, continued work throughout the district and his leadership. And I want to acknowledge, which is very meaningful, Principal Green is here tonight. I see BHS faculty as well supporting. So it is really important that your voices are heard, and we receive this information, and we feel very fortunate with your presence here tonight. Thank you for your leadership. So we. 2-minute break. So we'll have a 2-minute transition before the audit. So if we want to think. All right, thank you. We are going to be back in session with item B, the auditor's report. Great, thank you. All right. My daughter has the flu. Hi, welcome. Yep, we can come right up. Yes, these last two. Perfect, thank you. still thinking the auditor's report will take 1 hour.
Are we behind?
Yeah, like 20 minutes. Okay. Yeah. We'll make up for it. Yes, yep, I opened it, thanks.
We are, I'm going to hand it over to our Director of Finance. We've got our annual sort of review from auditors, and so I'll turn it over to Nate to set the stage.
All right, good evening, folks. So we're here tonight to present the fiscal year 2019 audit. We've talked briefly about some of the most relevant items in the audit as they pertain to budgeting, but this is going to be a chance to go a little bit deeper. Hopefully you've had a chance. It is posted on the website. We added it to board docs as well. So we have here tonight Josh Quinn, who is relatively new to RHR Smith, a few years now, right? But I'm happy to say he's also a former Vermont school business manager. So he has been very helpful in this process, in particular as someone who has that experience and I've been able to bounce things off of and learn from along the way as well. And he's going to be doing the presenting of most of the information tonight. We also have a face that'll look familiar to those of you who were here last year and prior years, Ron Smith, who is the owner of RHR Smith. Is that what you're called, the owner, president? So we've been using RHR since I started here, so I think this is our 5th audit with them. And I'm pleased to say I think you'll see that there's some signs of real progress and so forth in the audit, but as we've said every year, there's definitely remain opportunities for improvement in how we do our work here. And those are things that you're going to hear a little bit about tonight. So with that, I'll turn it over to Josh and let him run through some of the highlights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So what I usually do is I will run through a couple of the statements, schedules, some of the summary things that we think are probably most interesting to you guys. If you have any questions as I go through something, please holler out. After I go through the actual audit, I'll go through the management letter, the comments that we have in the management letter, and then we'll open up to just general questions as well. So I'll get started. So I'm just going to reference page numbers and then statements as well as I go through it. So if you all...
And it's, if I can interrupt, Bonnie, is this something, so we can just click on the link in board docs, it might help to flash it up on the screen, particularly for the viewers, at least so people can see where we are when the time comes. Thank you.
All right, first one we're going to go to is page 16, and that's statement C. So this is your balance sheet for your governmental funds. We're going to cut right to the credits in the general fund, and I believe you guys have already looked at this. And as far as your unassigned fund balance, which is down at the bottom of $1.2 million, for a total fund balance of $6.4 million. There you go. $5 million of that is committed, and then about $82.5 is non-spendable, which is prepaid items that you've paid for in FY19 that are actually for FY20. Also on this statement are your other governmental funds column, and that we'll get to further down in the reports, as well as your debt service fund, which is a major fund because of the size of it. Next page, we're going to go to 18, which is statement E. Yep, okay, yeah. So the fund balance, unassigned fund balance at $1.257 million. That's the number that we went through with Nathan while we were on site in the fall, and I believe that's the number you guys have been using for your budget as well, while what you're rolling over to offset taxes for FY21. Next is going to be page 18, and that's your statement of revenues and expenditures for the year. of FY19. So your total revenues for FY19, $78 million. Your total expenditures, $77 million. You also had transfers in of 650 and out of 1.2. We break those out from expenditures, so we're not recognizing revenue multiple times. And that resulted in a net change in fund balance of $163,000. And so you started with $6.273 million in fund balance and finished the year at 6.4, which is then also reflected back up in that original statement C we were looking at. Page 38 is your long-term debt schedule. So this year you had additions of $8.7 million. 8 of it was for, I think, a bond for, I think it was pre-K project, is that right?
That was the biggest component of it. That borrowing is all associated with the 10-year capital plan.
So your total balance at the end of fiscal year 19 is $39 million. 1.2 of that is due in the current year you're in right now. And you can see a listing of all the bonds that you have open is right below this schedule. I'm going to skip through all of your pension information. That basically comes from the actuarial reports that we get from the actuaries, and then we represent it in the financial statements. It talks about all your different liabilities. And I'm going to go skip right to page 88, which is Schedule C. So Schedule C, this is the beginning of all of your non-major special revenue funds. So this is an asset sheet component, or I'm sorry, a balance sheet component to begin with. And this is multiple pages long because you have lots of special revenue funds. And then beneath that is the revenues and expenditures. And so you can see what each special revenue fund has inside of it, as well as all the activity in the special revenue funds for the year summarizes. And then this number is combined with your capital projects funds as well and rolls back up to your statement C. So it is somewhat logical if you were to go from statement to schedules. It kind of gets into more detail as you go deeper into the financial statements. Schedule E, which is page 99, that's your non-major capital project funds, asset or balance sheets, as well as revenues and expenditures.
Just want to point out while we're here on this page, so this is the page where you will see the balance of what remains of the proceeds from the lease of the Taft building. So just to remind folks, when that process was complete, we actually went to the voters. We had an item on the ballot, and the voters approved reserving or kind of setting aside that fund, those monies in their own fund for investments in Horizons and On Top or other infrastructure needs. So there is quite a bit of flexibility there ultimately when the time comes that the board wants to use those monies for any of those purposes, but it is ultimately intended for infrastructure support.
Okay, so now I'm going to jump out of the financial statements and into the management letter. Do you have the management letter posted as well?
I can figure out how to click here.
And so just a description of sort of the process that we take. So for a week in the spring, we visit Nathan in the finance office, and we do lots of internal controls testing, sampling work, as much work as we can get done before the actual year closes to try to give us more time to focus purely on the audit when we come back after the year is closed. And then we come back, I think this year we were back in October, and then we did the actual audit work, and through that process confirm your fund balance, for example, and then move on to prepare and then present the financial statements. So a lot of these comments come out of our pre-audit work. So the first one, purchase orders, and you'll probably see this every year, is how I usually start off with purchase orders. Because as much as the finance office tries to make people do what they're supposed to do and follow the procedures, there's always going to be items that are ordered before the purchase order has been approved or even without a purchase order. And that's just how it goes, unfortunately. I put it on there because we find it, but it wasn't to the extent that it wasn't every single one. So this is just, we found a sample of it, so I threw it on there and said, yes, these are still happening. One of the things I mentioned is there's a form that Nathan and I had discussed, maybe updating your procedures to say, in the event that you can't write a purchase order, and there would be reasons why. So for example, if the toilet is flooding and you need a piece, don't write a purchase order, go out and get the piece and fix it. So you can write into your procedures those types of things and maybe have an accounts payable approval voucher that can then follow your procedure. And so that's one of the things that we audit is, we look at your procedures and we say, okay, this is what your procedure says. Are you following your procedures? And so in some of these instances that doesn't make any sense to follow your procedure, maybe you should tweak your procedures. Federal procurement, this one, so this is my first year auditing Burlington School District. I had some discussions with the former audit manager, and both federal procurement as well as student accounts, I want to preface these comments with, these have made substantial progress just in the past year, and I think even more progress in the past 5 years since we've been here. So even though there's still comments, there's still room for improvement, there is improvement going on, and that's what we're looking for every year, is to see that there is improvement in the procedures that we're looking at. So federal procurement, similar to the purchase order procedure, there's a federal procurement procedure that you must follow when you're using federal funds, and there were some instances that we pulled that some of those things maybe weren't followed exactly. So it's just being diligent in the duties and the roles to make sure those things are followed, because the risk of those things not being followed is basically disallowed costs, and all of a sudden your general fund is having to pay for things that could have been included in a federal program if it had been procured correctly. And that didn't happen this year, but that is a potential risk of not following your procurement procedures.
And Josh, if I could just provide some specific examples, so kind of give you a sense of what that means, right? There are, for example, requirements for certain types of federal purchases about how many quotes have to be received in order to make a choice, right? So we might have had a situation where someone ended up buying some goods, but they didn't get the right number of quotes, or perhaps they even did, but they didn't document them in our system to the extent that they should have, so that the auditors couldn't verify that they'd done that work. They may have selected a type of purchase. There's different categories that the feds require us to use. They may have chosen a type of purchase that they didn't fully support, again, with the attaching documentation. In particular, an area where I think we've struggled to kind of convey the significance of it is what is called a sole source purchase, where the federal procurement rules allow us to select sole source to essentially not go through a process of comparing prices if there's only one vendor that provides the good or the service that we need. However, that's extremely rare. And one of the things that we have been working with the staff who's doing the purchasing on the front lines to help them understand is just because, for example, there's only one company that sells Coca-Cola doesn't mean that you can purchase cola and call it sole source, right? There's a suitable substitute product that's out there. And so in cases like that, we have an obligation to actually go through the process of getting quotes for those other items. One other example that I imagine came up, because I know I've seen it here and there, is there's a process for checking to ensure that the vendor is not prohibited from receiving any federal funds. So we can't buy something from an entity who's been suspended from the ability to receive those funds. And there's a whole process, a website you go to check this out. You're supposed to print out the form and attach it. And sometimes it may not happen, but again, sometimes it can be a matter of not including the appropriate documentation to prove that has actually, that you've actually done that work to be in compliance. So those are just kind of some more specific examples of what we're talking about when we say that we haven't followed the procedure that we've outlined that says you have to do this, this, and this. But as we've mentioned before, it is onerous on the people who do that work. And so it's not surprising that at times we don't get it all quite right. And I think one of the things that's encouraging in my experience has been when we have gone back to people and said, we need to do this, here's why, people have generally been receptive to understanding. You know, they have to go through the process of venting about the fact that it's a real pain in the rear to have to do this stuff, but generally speaking, folks have ultimately said, we'd rather go through and take these steps than not actually be able to make the purchases with the federal dollars. So I think I've been at least pleased that when we are good enough at supporting them and kind of educating them, that the folks making those purchases have been open to changing and to improving compliance.
The next one, credit cards, open accounts. We did note some instances where we were missing some itemized receipts or invoices. And we actually recommended, I don't believe, at least at the time that I wrote this, that there was a written policy for credit cards and open accounts. So we recommended that one actually be established so someone can defer back to it and say, okay, what do I need to do, as opposed to either calling someone in the bank officer, asking the other person they know with a credit card what they do. That's just a recommendation. And then student accounts, as I said, there's a couple things that we found in our review of the student account activities. As I said, from speaking with my predecessor here, student accounts has definitely made progress. I think a couple of these areas that we pulled in some of the schools that had the biggest issues were ones where you had some turnover in the people who were managing those student accounts. And I think that was a lot of the issue that we found was the people that typically manage student accounts in the schools are the administrative assistants, and they have lots to do. And they're also suddenly thrown in to be sort of pseudo bookkeepers, I would call it. And so without some training or even time to do that stuff, a lot of them are just doing the best they can. And I think some training, as well as even a procedural manual for student accounts would also be very helpful. So someone can just be handed something and say, okay, this is how we operate our student accounts. So that's the management letter. I know this is not as thrilling as your previous discussion, but any questions or comments?
Commissioner Fisher. So, thank you very much. I'm used to IT audits, but similarly, they come out with a management letter. And one thing that is different about this doesn't look at what has been closed from the prior year. So I went back a couple of years and looked. And so it is, if you go back and look at just count the quantity and severity of the issues in the prior years and look at this list, it's clear the great work that Nate and his team have done. Mm-hmm. So I want to recognize that. The other question I had is around the student accounts. That recommendation for a policy and manual was in the prior year. So is that something that you can put on your very busy schedule to do at some point before the next audit?
Yeah, so here's a little update, a little more deeper history on this. We actually we have a draft that we've had for over a year of a manual, and it was assembled by a couple of very bright, talented people who were part of the business office, and ultimately moved and got promoted and took opportunities in Addison County. So we've had one challenge of the turnover there, but also part of that plan was to incorporate these student activity accounts into our financial software, Munis. We actually purchased the module for it, began some of the configuration, and then the statewide approach to a financial system and moving to e-finance came along. And so at that point, we stopped our work on the Munis system. This was over 18 months ago, and started and said, okay, well, we'll tackle this as part of the e-finance conversion. One of the things that I asked about during that conversion process was whether e-finance was capable of providing the kind of support for incorporating student activity accounts into the software. And really, my motivation for that, as much as anything else, is to allow us from our offices to monitor spending and transactions in these accounts the same way we do all of the other kind of transactions that are going on from our general fund and so forth, and our grants and everything. I would say that the way it was represented to us in terms of e-finance's capacity to do that turned out to be more ambitious in that, in fact, e-finance, while it can manage it by just treating them more or less like any other account, what the system doesn't have, unfortunately, is a module designed specifically for the unique elements of these accounts, right? So where we might want to, for example, allow the high school to cut checks right from the high school so that they can make payments to vendors, give it to their students, that sort of thing. Allow for them potentially to be, well, ultimately the point is we could incorporate these into our software. We're still going to explore it, but I would say that I've kind of taken a pause in that respect in figuring out what's the best way to do it that still allows these accounts to be operated and managed in a reasonably efficient way. What I don't think will work for us is treating these accounts like the rest of our spending, which is to say that we cut checks once a week and there's a kind of more laborious process of requisitioning and approvals and purchase orders and so forth. I don't think that that is the best fit for these type of accounts. What I don't know is how then to achieve an end where we actually kind of have some ability to kind of monitor and control this centrally and still provide that flexibility. I don't see that functionality in e-finance at this time. So I'm not sure where we go in that respect. We don't need to do that in order to produce better instructional and supporting materials about what type of activity and expenditures are appropriate for student accounts, what type of deposits are appropriate. We can do that without solving the financial software issue. So I think we can make some progress in that area, but in the next year, I don't see us achieving, well, I would say it's my ultimate goal, which is to kind of have it fully integrated into our software.
Okay, thank you. So I guess my other questions for our auditors, you guys see a lot more districts than we do. How do we compare to districts of similar size and complexity in terms of our financial stability and our processes?
Well, you're the biggest, so there's really no comparison. But as far as your financial processes, while everyone is unique, everyone is essentially the same as far as their process and procedures. And part of our discussions that I have with Nathan when we're doing our test work as well as our audit is talking through some of those things that we see. So for example, one of the big issues that we're seeing in the state is HRAs and liabilities for HRAs. And now that the state plan is in effect January 1, 2021, what is that going to do and how is that going to look? We've actually been recommending to clients who have asked to set up an HRA reserve fund account to try to smooth out those HRA expenses, because one year you may have 50 grand, and one year you may have 300 grand. And so it's really difficult for your budget to respond to that. So that's one of the suggestions that we've made. If there's an additional fund balance that's in surplus from the prior year, maybe set aside some of that money, you can do it inside your budget, some of those things. There's also, your budget's around, I'm going to just ballpark $80 million. You finished the year with $1.2 million. It's less than 2%, to really tight. A couple of special education students and a facilities issue, and all of a sudden you're $500,000 in deficit. I think that goes really quickly, and I don't know, I have not seen any type of, ed reserve funds that I've seen in other places that actually are using reserve funds to respond to those issues that you just are unexpected and can't budget for. Those would be my comments as far as how you guys compare to some of the others.
Thank you.
Great question, Commissioner Fisher. Thank you for that. Commissioner Curry.
Is it this one? Yeah. And along those lines, I have a question related to that, and then a second question, which is, can you speak to how our capacity in our business office compares to our need, and that in relation to other districts' capacity in comparison to their need?
I don't think I ever go into a business office and think that it's overstaffed. I think they're all understaffed with all that they're asked to do. And I think everybody struggles with how to staff it appropriately. And everyone operates differently. Right now, for example, Burlington is going through refinance. I have districts who are talking about adding staff specifically for refinance because of some of the difficulties in bank reconciliations and the other aspects of that program. That's not across the board, but there's definitely discussions. I was at one today that really struggles with refinance. It doesn't sound like Nathan and his group is having the same struggles, which is great. So I think from their capacity perspective, they're able to absorb some of that. But I would definitely not say that they're overstaffed.
Thanks. And just one more question. Now that you've had the chance to get to know Burlington for a few years, I'm just curious if there are some high-level observations that you would want to share with the incoming superintendent about any overall patterns or, cautions at that high level.
What do you think of that one?
I have no comment. My response to that question would certainly be the financial microphone.
Yes. There you go. Thank you.
My response would be is Burlington is unique for the state of Vermont. There's only one Burlington and there's only one Burlington school district. And I think that probably the biggest challenge for this superintendent existing now and has been, and any future incoming superintendent, is the financial stability of the school system for sure. I think that there's tough decisions that superintendent is going to have to work with you all on in the future. Funding isn't, the red carpet's not rolled out for funding down the road. I wouldn't expect any handouts, to fund the cost of public education, nor even the grant money that comes to aid you to funding the cost of public education. So I think that that's going to be the biggest challenge, and certainly the biggest high level, observation, that I would make is to really make sure, that you're put in a position, to make good business decisions with the information that's put in front of you. And when you take on an endeavor to put a new $70 million renovation to this high school, as soon as that endeavor is done, it doesn't get any cheaper to maintain it. And certainly we see you lean in some areas being, the biggest school system with the largest infrastructure to maintain, but very little money to maintain it. And a lot of that's been on the heels, of the taxpayers. And certainly those are some of the decisions you're going to continue to be faced with, and it's just, I think it's the cold, hard, brutal truth is that you and every other school system in Vermont, and probably, I can only speak to Vermont and Maine, but you and every other school system is always continuously going to be asked to do more with little. And I think that that's going to be a huge challenge for your next superintendent, the one that you've had now, and for this school board going forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Curry. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Director Lavery. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to transition right into the monitoring report. This is actually a piece of that 2.3 conditions and activities of finance. So Nate, you can just continue.
Yep. We just say, thanks, gentlemen.
Yep. And we should thank our auditors. Ron didn't take a hands-on approach this time. We've had this transition, but he still felt the need to come and visit us in Burlington. So thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
For coming out and supporting the team.
I'm spanning the night. I'm going to go out and hit downtown church.
Dead set. Nectars, dead set. 7th anniversary, 10 p.m.
Thank you again. Thank you.
All right. Great. Thank you, Bonnie. So, so this is the financial condition and activities monitoring report. This was originally scheduled and anticipated to be provided a few months ago. We postponed it because we specifically wanted to make sure that we had the final audit and could reflect the results of that in this monitoring report. So I appreciate your patience for it. In waiting for it. I don't know that there are any particular highlights. You've had it for a while, so if there are questions that folks want to jump right into, I'm happy to address them.
Commissioner Alba?
Yes. I have a couple of verbiage that was used
in the lowest, the third one, no. About DMG, that it was a misunderstanding.
I think we're looking at limitation 8.
Yeah.
Is that right? Is that where you are?
Mhm. Yeah, where it says that there as one instance where a commitment was made of greater than 25,000 of unbudgeted funds due to a misunderstanding between the district administrators and the school board, parentheses, DMG group contract. Once this issue was clarified at May 21st, 2019 school board meeting, the contract was terminated. That wasn't a misunderstanding because we did not, no one came to the board and asked permission to spend $125,000. So I'm just asking that you change the verbiage from a misunderstanding.
I mean, I guess I would say that's exactly what it was a misunderstanding in that our impression, based on the conversations that the board had had, that we brought to the board and that the board had had with Nathan Levinson, was that there was support for this initiative. We talked about the fact that we were using them. Then months later, there became some concerns, which we ultimately addressed at the May 21st meeting. I'm not sure how we would have avoided that. Certainly, if we could go back and go back in time and do it differently, we would have done it differently. But I think the impression that we were operating under, Laura, I won't speak for her, but I know she was involved in a lot of those conversations. And between her and I in particular, I can say our impression was that the board supported this work. It turned out that that was wrong. And as soon as we understood it was wrong, we brought it back for the discussion that I think you are asking for. It's absolutely regrettable that we didn't have that discussion to begin with, because it would have avoided having to have it later, and it would have avoided, I think, us investing in getting people excited about doing some of that work and then having to stop it. But given that we did have that misunderstanding, we felt like it was appropriate to reflect it in this monitoring report here, because that's what this is about. We're not going to complain, or we're not going to claim that we make the perfect decision all the time, and we think that these reports are here for us to kind of acknowledge that and own that.
Right, but there's a difference between a misunderstanding. Anything over 25,000 needs to have board okay to it, meaning that there is a vote taken here. That was never brought before this board for a vote.
I agree.
And the contract was signed. So as far as I'm concerned, misunderstanding is the wrong word to use.
Well, I guess I would say I completely agree that there was never a vote taken by the board. Where I would disagree is it's not spelled out that that's what is, in this case, defined as necessary. And I think now we understand that that's what the board would want to have happen in that case. We could change the word, but I'm not sure that.
Can I just clarify, what would you like to see happen, Commissioner Orwell? You want us to omit that piece, or is there language that you want to introduce? If you do, then share it with us, and we'll see if that'll be amenable to Director Lavery to make the modification.
Take out due to misunderstanding.
Just take it out.
Right, because you spent it, but you didn't misunderstand anything. I mean, you say it's a misunderstanding. My feeling is this could come back to bite us, and I can't say okay to that because it wasn't a misunderstanding.
So you're saying that we didn't misunderstand?
Commissioner Fisher.
It very clearly states that anything greater than $25,000.
Yeah, but the language we're talking about, yes, I heard what you said. I support what you're saying, but I'm saying introduce language for us to change it that'll satisfy your need, right? I mean, the only thing you said is we didn't misunderstand. okay? So what would you want us to put in there in terms of language to meet your needs?
Commissioner Fisher?
My proposal would be, and I concur with Commissioner Allwell, would be the status for 8 is not in compliance or somewhat in partial compliance. And as Commissioner Allwell said, the sentence would be, there was one instance where a commitment was made of unbudgeted funds between district administrators, of unbudgeted funds, period. I
Sure.
understand what you're saying, Director Lavery, but this is a report of what happened, and it was an unbudgeted expense that was made without board approval. And we should absolutely learn from this lesson so we don't repeat what happened, because clearly it's significant. But I agree with Commissioner Allwell.
I'm good.
Commissioner, anyone else? No, else? Okay. No
Sure,
other
so we
discussion?
can, if Director Lavery is amenable, we'll just change it to partial compliance and omit the word misunderstanding.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Thank you, Director Lavery. Any other discussion on the monitoring report? All right.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry, one
Commissioner
more question.
Fisher.
Around the use of debt. Director Lavery, when is the last time that we accessed short-term debt?
I can get that answer. I don't know off the top of my head. It's been
Has been years?
maybe 3 years.
Okay.
I couldn't say for sure, but it's been a long time, which is a good thing.
That's a great thing, because
Right.
I remember seeing your report where we were accessing that short-term debt. So,
Right. We can
again,
actually,
it's very easy when we're looking at financial audits and reports to say, oh, everything's great, but I know that that is due to a lot of hard work by Director Lavery and his team, so I don't want to gloss over that.
thank you. No, I actually, we can't quite see the answer to the question, but we can get a pretty good idea of it in the cash balance report there. So it actually, I just pulled it up, it's under the routine financial reports, but it does show that the last time I would say we probably used it, not having my actual numbers in front of me, it looks like it was in fiscal year 2017. And if you pull up that graph and look at it, you'll see that at that point, it's a blue line, and it dips down to pretty close to zero. I'd have to check the actual records, but I would say that generally, if it's that close to zero, I've probably taken on some short-term debt to make sure it doesn't go below zero. So that would be my guess in looking at the chart. It gives you a sense. Fiscal year 17.
So I'll leave them alone.
8:30 back. Great. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair Wool. So we'll present this report to be received to the board with the change of partial compliance for limitation 8 and withdrawal of the word understanding for the record.
Thank you. Report has been received. Next on the agenda is the chair's report.
You in exec session for negotiations?
We are our superintendent search committee co-chairs.
All right, well,
Yeah?
we've been very busy the past few weeks and trying to keep you guys up to date on what's been going on. We got about 30 applications for our screening committee, and we had selected 11, and we sent that to you all. We had our first meeting last night, and it was very well received. I think we have a great group of people. I think of diverse roles, perspectives, and I think everyone's really excited about this process, as are we, so it was a good meeting. In that meeting, we covered group norms, which we created together. We went through confidentiality. We had them sign confidentiality forms. We went through a lot of the themes that came up during the stakeholder meeting. Everybody on the screening committee has taken the bias training, except one, but that was due to an email error. So she's going to be taking it. And now we are looking forward to our next week's meeting, which we're actually going to be looking at some resumes and videos for some of the top candidates to narrow them down for you all. We also just received today the list of questions from the SurveyMonkey. Thank you all for taking that SurveyMonkey. We haven't even looked at them yet, but we will be. We're going to get to that next, and you'll see the list of those questions as well. The interviews are on March 4th. You guys all should have invitations for that. And we're allocated an hour per finalist. We hope we have 3. And then March 5th is our public community forums where the top finalists will be able to answer some questions and the public can listen in. And those are about 30 minutes a candidate, just so that we can have the public stay and continue to hear each candidate. They will be on stage separately to give themselves, if they want to talk and answer questions. So, you guys have any questions?
Commissioner Fisher?
Should we start to publicize that March 5th date yet? Or do you want to wait for some kind of materials? Right?
Jeannie's working on some materials. I think we're not quite there yet,
Okay.
but we will certainly let you know, and we hope can invite people to come and even help with rides for those who won't be able to make it. So, right, Jeannie?
I was going to say, soon as you know where it's going to be.
You could do a save the date, and then I'll follow with the details.
So that should be able to confirm that by Friday.
Yeah.
We can. Yes. Thank you. Good questions. Thanks. Commissioner Alwa?
I just want to say if you need rides, I can help with rides too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your communication out and your emails informing the board. Thank you for your communication to our communication specialist, Russ Ellick, and updating that so we can direct the public to the timelines and any activity that has been happening surrounding the superintendent search. And your open invitation, if anyone has questions, that they can email you as well.
And one more last thing, we just are publishing the names of the screening committee members. We wanted to be sure that everybody opted in and signed the confidentiality agreement yesterday. So we had sent you guys the list, but we hadn't made it public, but now we can make it public, so you can, it's on our website, or it will be as of tomorrow. Russ has done an awesome job helping us to keep the website updated, so thank you.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda is the consent agenda. We approved it. Did we? No, motion to approve the consent agenda. Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Wick, a second. Commissioner Ivanchik. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the consent agenda has been approved. Thank you. Next is the committee reports. We'll start with community engagement. We just talked about the superintendent search. Next, we'll move to personnel and curriculum.
Yes. Well, I assume that you've read it. We had an interesting discussion. We're trying to see what ways that we can encourage teachers in the district to expand the curriculum offerings based on the input that we've received here in public from our constituents, specifically in response to the Earth Day and the environmental focus that's out there in the universe right now, and the response to the city and lake kind of structure that we have here, and how can we design a system where teachers are encouraged to pursue those kinds of expanded horizons and make them available to all students in the district. We had a very interesting discussion. You can read the topics that we looked at, and we have perhaps a solution that we can discuss a little bit later in the year regarding that, how we could go about doing that.
Thank you, Commissioner Carey. Next is finance and facilities.
We've been meeting quite weekly, and our meetings are getting longer and longer, it seems like every Wednesday morning. But we're coming close to, I think we're pretty much at what we had asked for was a plan within our budget, and tomorrow our discussion will be, should we ask for an independent estimator? And we're going to be discussing that and discussing are the numbers real, and trying to be more assured before we bring this before this board and the finance committee of the finance board of the city council. We have been so intensive in this work that we have not had a facilities meeting and discussing the capital plan, 10-year capital plan this month.
So just to add to that, we have a BCOC meeting on
That's
February
right.
20th, where we'll meet to discuss the bond to the public. So that's our next BCOC Construction Oversight Committee meeting. Thank you, Commissioner Pillsbury, for your update. Next is policy governance.
Policy and governance did not meet within the last month, and we have scheduled future meetings and will engage with staff on operational policies and some other matters.
Thank you. Next is diversity, equity, and inclusion.
We spent almost the entire meeting with the discussion about the newly designed and populated equity report card. So that was very detailed and informative, and I believe it will be available to everyone soon, as soon as the final design and formatting work is done. So that was exciting. And I do want to mention that we passed a resolution recommending to the board that we all receive training in gender identity, gender critical issues.
By Outright Vermont.
Yeah, by Outright Vermont, which I think is in the plan already, so.
Great.
Yeah, we had a nice presentation by Autumn Bangora, who's the district equity coach, about transgender education in this district and how there is no real transgender curriculum, but that she's developing it as part of the social justice curriculum. And at every school, it's the guidance counselor's sort of responsibility to incorporate this, because we have lots of transgender students in our district. She talked a little more specifically about Meredith at IAA, who's the guidance counselor there. And then we ended the meeting with voting to have Outright Vermont training for the board.
Great. Thank you. Commissioner Gulick.
I was just wondering, after listening to the talks this evening, the relevant stories and testimonies that we heard, if a simple thing that we could do as board members, maybe we could consider this, is adding our pronouns to our board email, closing, whatever they're called. Signatures. Thank you, Yao. Yes, to our signatures. It's a small gesture, but it's also a show of solidarity and support. So I think we should consider that.
Thank you, Commissioner Bullock. Commissioner Curry.
I just wanted to speak to the curriculum discussion around personal or proficiency-based learning or personal learning plans, and that's the underpinnings of the City and Lake program, and they just happen to have the expertise in the place-based learning. But the boards before this one discussed often how inequitable the YES program is. It creates these great disparities in access and opportunities to learning based on income and scholarships, which is never a good feeling. Year-end studies program, sorry. Being the scholarship kid is never, it's not really inclusive and equitable. So I just wanted to suggest that the board consider devoting a YES year or 5 years, whatever, to the students actually helping the teachers design a proficiency-based learning curriculum in their areas of interest, and that the entire school could be involved in that exciting opportunity for everybody to design that learning together. So that gives the student engagement quotient an opportunity to be raised.
Thank you, Commissioner Curry. I want want to speak to Director Lavery for 1 minute, just based on finance and facilities. I'm going to see if I can do one thing. Just 1 minute. Otherwise, we can start. Oh, we can start, yeah. Item number 9, board self-governance. Commissioner Wick and Commissioner Fisher, 4.4, board officers.
Commissioner Fisher, would you like to?
Sure, I'll take this one. So this part of the board's policy was actually the first, I think, that we adjusted 2 years ago. So we did a pretty substantial rewrite to make clear how the officers were elected and that organizational meeting. And it also includes a provision to remove an officer, which was not in there before. To remove an officer. And then
Fire them? Or
no.
just don't have
So we can't, we can say that somebody's not an officer. We can't remove them as a commissioner. But we as a board can say, we no longer want you as the clerk.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, thanks. But I won't belabor this and extend the meeting. There was also, I read the statute. I didn't find anything that we were not in compliance with other than paying the clerk.
I noticed that too, Commissioner Fisher.
So I'll open it up for discussion.
Seeing none? Great. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. I'm waiting, I'm just gonna, go ahead, okay. So with, I'm trying to word this as best as possible. So I think finance, I just would like your support, Director Lavalley. How we go?
But I think you want to bring up this issue now, is probably want to amend your agenda in some way, just add, and just say like, social, on top, social groups, and then I can describe it. But
Okay.
it seems like you probably need to formally add it to your agenda now, right?
Yeah.
So I think if you just, for the election, that motion, you
Okay.
even, if people don't agree with it, you can just not pass it.
So it's
tonight,
about
but if they do.
approving Medicaid funds, that we don't typically approve Medicaid funds, they go ahead, but since they want to,
Is it something next week, you guys, or is it? 'Cause
they're waiting on it, services are being
You
held up.
could do it
because
next
of
week too.
Oh, well, if, we don't want to.
I'm not in that motion. They'd say the sooner the better. Can they wait a week? Or sure they can wait a week. If that's
Yeah.
more convenient, then it's going to be more disruptive.
If you want, just, I think it's kind of springing it on everybody, but if it is that.
But it isn't, it is services that based on, it's not a threshold, is it?
It is, yeah, it'd be like almost 50,000.
Okay.
Just in light of the conversation, if that, to respect the interpretation that Kathy had, people seem to.
So if you want to try to describe it as a motion to amend the agenda, describe what we're doing, and then I'll second it.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
if people don't want to go forward tonight, we can.
All right. So, actually, do you want to, all right. So I want, we want to amend the agenda based on, yeah, I'm trying to figure out the best way to do it. So, I'm trying to think of how.
So there's an item that
Yeah.
may need our attention this evening that Claire and Nathan were just discussing. And so I would just suggest that, I think the chair's in the best position, even though she doesn't usually make motions, we understand, but maybe describe, like, I would, if I were the chair, I'd say, motion to add the following to the agenda, and then just describe it.
Great. So motion to add the following to the agenda. So it had been brought to my attention, on top was seeking services from the Stern Center. And the director of Student Support Services had reached out and said, based on our past experience with DMG, they were concerned that any expenditures, Medicaid above and beyond necessarily what they might have budgeted, would need board approval. And am I saying it correctly? So that I said that if it's district leader, they're approving this, and it's, endorsed by the principal of On Top and the superintendent and director of student services, that they could go ahead and present it or not, depending on the dollar amount. And so we don't want to get into the habit of the board having to approve Medicaid funds continually, that is they are authorized to do that funding, correct?
So I think if, as I understand it, in order, if you move to just amend your agenda, I can kind of give the brief overview of why it's here, what it is, and then if folks are satisfied with it and want to authorize it tonight, we can, and if not, it can be postponed. It can come back when you've had more time to mull it over.
Okay.
So then maybe.
We need a second.
What I'll say is, if it's okay, Chair.
Yep.
I would make a motion to add to the agenda the topic that Claire just alluded to.
Stumbled through.
So on top social groups.
On top.
You're it.
Is there a second?
Second, Commissioner Alwell, thank you. Okay.
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Director Lavery.
All right, so we'll make this quick. Bonnie, I just shared the document with you, so it's at the top of your queue. Can you just throw it up on the screen there? I know it's not going to be super readable, but I'll read.
I have to get into my emails on this
Okay,
one.
well, I will describe it, and so I won't know it in a lot of detail, but what this boils, actually, you know what, I'm just going to read this, because I think Laura probably did a better job, Laura and Bobby, than I could do. This is what they wrote. Burlington School District is committed to providing access to education to students with disabilities. The alternative programs, On Top and Horizons, have a student population that has mental health, trauma, and cognitive development needs that exceed those in our schools, which in large part is why these students have been placed in the alternative setting. In the current school year, On Top staff have been struggling with student behaviors, including aggression on each other and adults, significant student absenteeism, parent complaints, and staff safety concerns. The partnership with Stern Center will provide consultation and direct services to students around social cognition in the On Top program for fiscal year 20 school year. That's what we're in right now. We'll track the data, including student participation in the program, student progress, and absenteeism in the school setting, as well as other measures to demonstrate the efficacy. So the reason that we're bringing this forward is because the total anticipated cost is probably a little bit less now, because there's been some delay in being able to get this in front of you. But at the time, they estimated the total cost being about $61,000, and there were grant funds, other grant funds, they already got to the tune of about $10,000, that would bring that cost down to $50,000. So then the question was, where are we going to find the $50,000? We reviewed our Medicaid reinvestment funds. We said this is a permissible use. We believe it will be supported, but we felt like we wanted to come back to the board and have the board say yes, because this was not a budgeted and planned use of these funds. It wasn't budgeted at all. We would be spending more Medicaid funds than we had anticipated spending this year, hence our request for you folks to approve it. And again, if this is all too much too quickly, we can certainly wait. I just know that they have been patiently waiting to get through the budget process and all the many other kind of demands on your time to be able to put this forward. And so while Bobby and Laura could do a better job than I could in describing it in more detail, I think if folks are comfortable tonight, then being able to authorize the use of the Medicaid funds for this purpose would certainly allow them to kind of ramp up as quickly as possible.
Commissioner Curry.
Yeah, the question is, do we typically spend all of our Medicaid funds every year?
Good question. I'll answer that in just a slightly long-winded way. When I started, we were actually spending more Medicaid funds than we were getting through Medicaid reimbursement by almost $200,000 a year, so we had kind of an unsustainable plan. We were able to, through a combination of increasing the revenues into that fund and also controlling our expenditures out of that fund, we were able to kind of reverse that. What we're in the process of doing, and we've just about achieved it, and I think that I would say in my estimation this investment, we'd still be on track to achieve what I want to achieve, which is making sure that we are spending the Medicaid funds that we have already earned, as opposed to building a Medicaid spending program that relies on anticipated revenues, because they are a reimbursement process related to services that we provide students. And so it's not a fixed dollar amount, it's not entirely predictable, and we have seen some significant fluctuations in that revenue over time. So essentially what we've been doing is spending a little less than we've been taking in, or a lot less in some cases than we've been taking in on an annual basis, in order to build up enough money in that fund that we can say, we're now spending last year's money. And we'll always know that exactly how much money we have to spend out of it. And if we have a situation where the revenues decrease in a year, instead of having to address it right now, like, oh no, we've made commitments for this current year and we're not gonna get the money. Instead, we'll be in a position where we can responsibly say, okay, we're gonna have to make sure that next year we plan our expenditures from the fund to the money that we know we're gonna have available to us. So we've kind of done both in my recent history, spend more than we've earned and spend less than we earned, but we're getting to a point where we would routinely be spending the money that we've already kind of have in the bank, which I think is the best way to manage these funds.
Thank you. Thank you for that explanation. So the total dollar amount is $49,000 from the Medicaid funds.
Yeah, 49, in their memo, again, which this may fluctuate a little bit given the passage of time, but they were estimating needing $49,626.21. So let's call it an even $50,000, just to give you a sense of order of magnitude. We definitely have the money in that fund to afford that this year. There's no question. Like I said, we're talking about building up amount of money that is roughly going to be $500,000 or so on an annual basis. So yeah, this sets us back a little bit in that process, but not in a way that I think really is going to cause any major delay in achieving that goal of making it sustainable.
Okay. Commissioner Fisher?
Can you comment on the last paragraph, which is about expanding this to Horizons and continuing this in FY21 budget?
Yes, yeah, we did kind of incorporate that into our Medicaid plan budget for 21. So that's just
for both the programs.
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. Yep. We kind of did the analysis and felt like we could sustain this. We don't envision this necessarily going on forever, but it's also going to be kind of like, A, is it working? And then if it works, is there a point where we can phase it out, or do we need to maintain it? That'll be probably a few years down the road before we really have an answer to that question.
Commissioner Curry?
And what's the risk of not doing it?
I probably can't speak in the most articulate way to that. I would say that what Laura and Bobby have represented to us are the challenges in here, and that they think that this service is something that will help reduce some of those issues that they talked about, including particularly the absenteeism and the kind of aggressive behaviors and that sort of thing. So I think they believe that this will be an ingredient in solving those problems, but I couldn't honestly say that I could describe the specifics of how that works or what the connection is.
Commissioner Watson?
That would also indicate retention, and as we know, it's much more expensive to not serve a student and have to send them to a different school.
Yes. Thank you. Great. Commissioner Pillsbury? Okay, thank you. So you made the motion?
Didn't we already make a motion and now we're discussing something?
No, that we're.
To amend the agenda, which is
Oh, we
Right,
haven't
so
done the
now
actual
so
motion.
now we'll make a
So
motion.
Keith is making the actual motion.
Okay, go ahead.
I did. Oh.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay, I'm a little confused though, the second paragraph, is that already in our fiscal 21 budget?
Yes.
we baked
So-
that into the
Okay, so
total
I'm
estimate.
just moving the first one. Starting, basically I am moving that we will provide $50,000 to, in Medicaid reimbursement funds, for funding this program for On Top.
Great. And second?
Second.
Commissioner Carey, all those in favor?
Comment?
Discussion.
Clarification, I would just suggest the wording be up to $50,000.
Yes, I was going to say the same, so up to $50,000.
Do we want to include Horizons on top and Horizons?
That's already in.
It's in there.
Yes, you're right, it
This
says,
year is only on top, but if you put it in there and there's an opportunity to do it within those funds, it's not going to hurt, right? But I think the priority is on top, as I've understood it.
so we'll amend the motion to include on top and Horizons upwards to $50,000.
Can I just suggest that we not specify the school and it just be in agreement with the Sturgeon Center in the event that it just opens up. It just means we have an agreement with the Sturgeon Center for the district, which
That's right.
is, probably what we need.
Good advice, okay.
So what's the motion now? So Bonnie can get the,
Okay, move that we approve the spending of up to $50,000 with an agreement with the Stern Center for $50,000 in Medicaid reimbursement funds to have a contract with the Stern Center.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Pillsbury. Thank you, Commissioner Curry. So, any discussion, further discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, passes. Motion passes. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Next is the motion to move into executive session. That was
I
suspended.
make a motion to resume executive session.
Yeah.
Great, we're gonna have a 2-minute break and we'll meet you in the cafe. Second,
I did.
Commissioner Sowers.
But it's not on, so you can.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, we're resuming. She had seconded the motion.